Since the beginning of time, human beings have fought each other, each time creating more deadly weapons in a never-ending search for peace. Almost 500 years ago, Christian men and women known as Anabaptists chose not to bear arms, even if this meant persecution and death. Peace to them became a way of life. Today, the Mennonites, the Brethren in Christ, and others who choose to live in the Anabaptist tradition continue to see peacemaking as a central part of their faith experience. It is one thing to deal with the evils of the world or persecution from the outside. But what happens when trouble comes from within, when those who should be the peacemakers can't get along? In the latter part of the 19th century, Mennonite workers found their way to Dhantari, India, to address the ravages of famine and disease. Ships and then trains carried shipments of food and medicine, and later doctors and teachers to heal the physical and spiritual wounds caused by strife between neighboring countries and among religious and ethnic factions. Over the years, the church in India grew in numbers and prestige. The hospital and schools they started provided their region with high-quality health care and education. Then conflict struck.
If you look at the whole history of India, community-wise, there has always been conflict. There is conflict between Muslims, between Hindus and Muslims, and also between Christians. So conflict is not something that is new to Indian culture. But the question is that when we live with conflict, it can turn bitter.
For the Mennonites in India, the issue had to do with power. Who got it, how they got it, and what they did with that power.
There were allegations of misusing authority and the withdrawal of the ordination of a bishop. Because of this kind of friction, many people felt they should form a parallel conference.
And that is what happened. In 1984, at the annual Indian Mennonite Conference, the conflict turned so bitter that the church divided. One group continuing to call itself the Mennonite Church of India, the other taking on the hopefully temporary name, the Ad Hoc Group. M.K. Nathan, a photographer and congregational leader, became a member of the Ad Hoc Group.
What took place was indeed a tragedy. It was very painful. We were blinded at that time.
P.K. Singh, a welder and neighbor of M.K. Nathan, remained on the opposite side, with the Mennonite Church of India. He remembers the pain of separation.
We were like a family. There were a lot of hurt feelings. We belonged to the same church, so the split was a tragedy. A lot of people were affected by this. Families were divided.
Ironically, the hospital and schools operated by the Mennonites to heal wounds were now matters of controversy. Church members accused brothers and sisters in administrative roles of showing preferential treatment to their friends and families.
We feel that a lot of injustice was done. Those who were in the MCI had to pay 300 rupees to get our daughters admitted for nursing training, while those who were in the Ad Hoc Group paid virtually nothing.
The split left the new Ad Hoc Group in charge of the hospital and MCI, the Mennonite Church of India, in charge of the church buildings, a situation that quickly increased the tensions.
When the church split, we requested MCI to give us a place to worship, and that was denied to us. We asked for a place where our people could get married, and that too was denied. We were barred from entry into any of the Mennonite church buildings.
The conflict intensified. On one occasion, church officials called in the police to help maintain order between the two groups. The conflict seemed beyond repair.
Very often I thought that this separation had probably come to stay, that the split would always be there. I always hoped for the day when we could really come together, but that was only a hope.
As the conflict moved from the church to the courts, outsiders began to take notice, many of whom had been educated in the Mennonite schools or treated at the hospital.
Even the Hindu and Muslim communities began to ask, what has gone wrong with your people? There were definitely a lot of questions. We lost credibility with the community.
They said, "You Christians are supposed to be living peacefully together." That made us stop and think. Why are we fighting with each other?
Questions also came from within.
At the end of a service or during service, we say, "Peace be unto you." But what does it really mean? And I think that the whole concept of peace has not been nurtured in our churches. And that is the very sad thing.
Coming to church at the time of the split was not a happy time for me. We had put God in two places. I could never feel God's presence in the worship services.
Ultimately, we did realize that our witness was very, very weak, and that it wasn't a witness at all to non-believers.
In 1990, this realization prompted the first step toward reconciliation.
Everybody was talking about reconciliation, about coming together, but nobody wanted to take the first step. The Lord led me to stand with boldness and say, "Why don't we call our brothers back to this meeting?"
Bishop Malagar and I received an invitation letter from the MCI to join the annual conference. I was delighted because we were hoping and praying for reconciliation. I immediately wrote back and said, "Yes, I am coming."
After 6 years of separation, the day finally arrived for the ad hoc group and the Mennonite Church of India to be reunited.
Well, the process was started. The process of reconciliation was started.
Many of us look to the Lord for a day when all this strife and the conflict would be over. Today it is a great day for us because we have at least started on that path. My message to churches around the world who are experiencing conflict is that Jesus calls us to love. When we don't love, we lose that fellowship. And when there is no fellowship and unity, then we lose our strength.
It is both parties that need to forgive each other. It is a myth to say there is reconciliation when there is no forgiveness.
Peace is not a one-time process. It begins somewhere. It probably begins with forgiveness.
In the coming days, members of the Mennonite Church in India move ahead with a renewed hope for the continuing work of reconciliation.
Over here is the congressional building.